Bam. All right, we're rolling. All right.
Okay, Kim. Sorry to keep you.
No. You're good. You're good. Everybody's on your time now, buddy. You are the. I got it. Okay. You ready? I'm going to adjust the camera a little bit. There we go. All right. He's all yours.
All right. I think we're. You ready, Mr. George?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, Kate, you want to kick us off?
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kate. I'm an educator at the National World War II Museum here in New Orleans. Thank you for joining us today in this very special program in collaboration with the Veterans History Museum of the Carolinas. And before I turn it over to our presenters, I want to talk a little housekeeping. So throughout this program, if you have questions for our veteran, there is a button at the bottom that you should see Q&A. If you click that, a window will pop up and you can type your questions in there. And hopefully we can get to a few at the end. Also, this program is being recorded, so if you have to step out or you miss it at any point, it will be up on our YouTube later today. And we thank you for joining us today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our very own Joey Balfour.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, like Kate said, my name is Joey Balfour, and I'm the Curator of Oral History at the National World War II Museum. Tomorrow is the 76th anniversary of D-Day, the Allied invasion of Normandy, which truly was the beginning of the end of the war in Europe. And here to discuss this event with me, we have a very special guest, a Navy veteran who experienced the D-Day invasion firsthand. Joining me this morning is Mr. George Sarros, and George is speaking to us from the Veterans History Museum, or the Veterans History Museum of the Carolinas in Brevard, North Carolina. The Veterans History Museum of the Carolinas invites you to visit them whenever you're in the Blue Ridge Mountains. You can also check out their website at www.theveteransmuseum.org. And we are also going to put that URL in the comment section. So please check out their website when you have a moment. So with that, Mr. Sarros, I would like to thank you very much for joining me today.
Well, it's nice to be with you, Joey. I appreciate it.
So could you give us a little bit of background on yourself, Mr. George? Could you tell us when and where you were born, and tell us a little bit about you before you went in the service?
Well, I was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1925, April 17, 1925. I went to Nash School, a grade school. I went to Austin High School, a high school. And then before I could graduate from high school, I was drafted and I was joined in the Navy and was shipped to Farragut, Idaho for basic training. That was the start of my Navy career with the Navy.
Can we actually put up slide 1, because that I believe is a photo of George at Farragut, Idaho. Yep, right there on the left side of your screen, we see George with his fresh boot haircut.
Yeah.
And then the image on the right, George, if I'm not mistaken, you are in the back in the center, correct?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
So a quick question, how did y'all get your hats to stay on the back of your head like that?
Well, I don't know. We were able to do it. I guess with the hair, I keep it on there. Yeah. And those are my shipmates.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can we take that one down? So what were you trained to do in the Navy? What was your specialty or your rating?
I was in the engine room on an LST. We had two 12-size engines down there. And I was there with Floyd Hicks and Patterson. There was 3 of us down in the engine room. That was our responsibility. We had the control of the ship.
And when and where did you join your ship?
In New Orleans. Yeah. I was at boot camp for about 8 weeks. Then I went to Farragut. I went to Virginia. It was an amphibious base there. I was there for about another two months. Then I had orders to go to New Orleans, and that's where I picked up the ship.
And what ship was that?
It was the LST-515. She was built in Seneca, Illinois. There it is.
There it is right there.
That's the ship.
And you said your duty station was down in the engine room. You were a motor machinist?
Yeah, motor machinist, mate. We had two big 1262 engines down there. Yeah. And as you look at that ship there, it wasn't completely dead. It was in New Orleans where it completely was fitted out.
They got it finished up down here and then let y'all take it out to sea.
Yeah, well, we had a cruise, the breakdown cruise, and I remember we had a fire on it, and we got it fixed up, and we thought, oh boy, I hope this isn't going to be a bad ship. But for sure is, she was safe. She was safe. He kept us safe all the time.
Indeed, and that we will we're going to hear about right here in just a minute. So today we want to talk about D-Day, but before we get to that, preparations were made for D-Day, and like all amphibious assaults that were conducted during World War II, rehearsals were done ahead of time. And for Normandy, one of those rehearsals was Exercise Tiger. And Exercise Tiger began on the morning of April the 27th of 1944, about 5 weeks before the D-Day invasion. And those initial practice landings were marred by a friendly fire incident that took the lives of a number of American troops. I don't know that they've ever actually calculated the exact number. But that didn't stop the exercise. The exercise continued on, and things just kind of got worse from there. Early the following morning, April 28th, 1944, as during the trip to Slapton Sands to conduct another practice landing, the LSTs of Convoy T4, which your LST-515 was part of, was intercepted by a flotilla of German S-boats. The Allies referred to S-boats as E-boats. They were kind of the German variant of the PT boat. They were a little larger than PT boats, but carried a little less armament, but they were still dangerous and were still able to cause a lot of damage to the LSTs, as we're going to hear about here in just a minute. So on the night of April 20, or early in the morning, rather, of April 28th of 44, Mr. George, what was the first indication to you that something was wrong?
No, I didn't have any indication that there was anything wrong. I remember that we were supposed to have about 8 LSTs. We were supposed to go to Slapton Sands. We were supposed to make a practice beach there because the terrain was sort of like the beach in France. So we didn't leave until about 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. The weather was beautiful, but it was dark. You couldn't see anything. And our ship, 515, was the command ship. We had a lieutenant commander who was in charge of 8 of the LSTs. And then we were supposed to go to Slapton Sands, which was a farmer town. And the town was supposed to be, they took all the people out of that town because they wanted practicing for invasions, for military and that's where we were supposed to go and beach. But about 12 or 1 o'clock at night, we were called to general quarters, and I was stationed on the starboard side forward on a 40 millimeter gun. There was 3 of us in that. Well, about 10 minutes later, we were secured. So we went back, and I was back in my bunk, and it wasn't about 10 minutes later, then it came. So we went back to my gun, and then as I looked out to the back, I saw an explosion. And then another minute later, I saw another explosion. And then later I saw another explosion. LST-289 was the first ship that got torpedoed. She got torpedoed in the fan tail. The next one was ship 531. She got 2 torpedoes in midsection and she completely sank. Then the next ship got torpedoed. Then the lieutenant commander said that all the other LSTs are supposed to land on the beach. Captain Doyle said, no, we're going to go and help and get survivors. So as we were going down there as close as we could, the PT boats came after us. And from the bridge, they said, hold your fire, and telling us how close the PT boat was. Then the order came to open up fire, and we fired. And the next thing we knew, the torpedo went by our bow. We didn't get hit. And then we were secured. And then we went to the beach to help LST. Everybody was in the water. The water was 42 degrees. There were boarders laying all over. There was fire on the oil. And then we lowered our two Higgins boats, and we opened up the bow doors, and we lowered the ramp. So the Higgins boat went around and trying to pick up survivors and bringing them to the bow, and lowered them on the ramp. And then we brought them into the tank deck. Then we heard guys, I was still at my gun, and they were still screaming, and we were yelling out, hang on, mate, we're gonna pick you up, we're gonna pick you up. I remember Floyd Hicks, when I worked in the engine room, went down a ladder to pick up one of the fellas, and they grabbed him, and he was dead. And then he tried to pick up another guy, and they were dead. Most of them were dead. Our ship picked up about 100. And I remember we had one soldier on the table, and we tried to get him to survive. There was no luck. So our orders was to get a sack to put all the medals in there, their identifications. And we were out there for at least till 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And most of the survivors, we must have lost about 1,000 people altogether, ships, tanks, and all that. And then the Navy came in, and PT boats and all them all came to help to pick them up. And then we went back, I don't know where I think we landed on Sapton Sands, and that's where we took all the wounded off of there.
And LST-515 was the only LST that went back to help rescue. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were the only ship. Yeah.
Because there was a fear that the German S-boats were still in the area.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because we thought they came after us, and we thought if they'd have hit us, we all would have been gone. There would have been no one to be able to survive that thing. But we were fortunate enough. We fought, shot them out, and they left us, and then we went and started picking up survivors. And it was a hectic day.
And of that, what happened that night, the couple hours that span that, what single moment of that event stands out to you the most?
The most was how we lost all those men, our shipmates and the Army guys that didn't have a chance. We lost all that equipment. We lost the 2 LSTs. The LST-289 was saved, and they got her towed later on and took her to dry dock, and they fixed her up. But we lost most of the men on that ship too.
Yeah, I think the official casualty figures for Exercise Tiger were just over 1,000. There were 749 dead, of which 551 were Army, 198 Navy, and then there were over 300 wounded. That figure is undoubtedly higher than that, especially if you add in the casualties that were sustained the previous morning. And Exercise Tiger didn't stop there. The rehearsals continued on over the following day or two. I don't recall exactly how many days. But more Americans ended up dying during Exercise Tiger than were killed on Utah Beach during the D-Day invasion itself.
Yeah.
So if we fast forward 5 weeks, and it's time for the invasion of Normandy, and as the date nears, Mr. George, you have to know it's coming. After experiencing the battle that took place during Exercise Tiger, how did you feel about having to take part in the invasion of Normandy? Obviously, you didn't have a choice in the matter, but how did you feel about that?
Well, we were all nervous. We didn't know, because LSTs were expendable. If they made one trip, they're expendable because they cost about $1 million to fix. They figured if it got destroyed, it paid for itself. But we didn't know. We didn't know what was looking forward to seeing when we landed on the beach. We had no idea what.
And I like some of the nicknames y'all had for them. LST stands for Landing Ship Tank, but that's not what y'all typically referred to them as.
I forget what month they called them.
Well, my favorite was Large Slow Target.
Yeah. And she only made about 12 knots.
The speedboat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once you learn that today is the day, today's the day we're going, we're heading to take part in the invasion of Normandy, what's going through your head?
Very nervous whether we were going to make it or not, whether I was going to be able to come back home with my shipmates. Yeah, we had no idea what to expect, but we had no idea. We had to just do what we were ordered to do.
And for the Normandy invasion, what was your ship's role and which beach were y'all scheduled to land on?
I believe it was Utah Beach that we hit. And we had mostly equipment on ship. I remember the Texas battleship was out there. There was another battleship out there, and I remember it was pounding the beach. It was pounding the beach. Then about 1 o'clock, we had orders to go to the beach. And then I was in the engine room at that time with Floyd Hicks and Patterson. The three of us was down there. And we landed on the beach, and the beach was secured. The biggest problem we had was the mines in the water. That was our biggest problem there. And we unloaded, and then I came up topside, and I remember looking, and a German fighter pilot plane was coming to strafe us. And before I knew it, there was a P-47 on his tail and got him. And you couldn't believe the smiles that were on our faces when that. Then as I looked up, the sky was full of our bombers flying. And then I saw one of our bombers got hit and the wing came off. And the next thing I know, I saw the guys bailing out. And they got picked up. But we were secured, and then our bow doors were open, and we stayed there, unloaded, and then the ambulances came, and we were taking the wounded. We were putting them on the tank deck. Most people don't know, but an LST is about 350 feet long and about 40, 50 feet wide. So on the tank deck, you can put an awful lot of wounded. But we sailed from America. That ship was full of nothing but ammunition. And the tank deck was so big, you could put 400 or 500 wounded in there. And that was our job. And we stayed there until, maybe 11, 12 o'clock. And then we picked up paratroopers. We picked up the paratroopers, and then we sailed back to Southampton and unloaded. And our job was to just keep going back and forth from Southampton, England, to France, to each of the different beaches, unload, pick up survivors, wounded, and all that.
When y'all were at the beach in Normandy, did you have occasion to go topside and look around? I know you mentioned seeing the fighter plane, but were you able to actually see the beach itself?
Oh yeah, we walked on the beach. We went in the city. We had liberty. This was later on when things were really secure. And the skipper gave us liberty to go into the town. The towns were all destroyed. Their houses were gone. We ran into some of the people there, and then we stayed, we tried to get whatever we could find. And then we had to get back because the tide was coming in and we had to sail back. So about 4 or 5 of us were almost late, and I remember the skipper was up top looking at us, and I thought, uh-oh, we're going to get on report, but we never did. Yeah. But
Well,
we made 52 trips across the English Channel.
52.
Yeah. And then I remember when I had a boil on my leg, and I was going down to, the medic was going to lance it. And then there was an explosion, and I thought our ship got hit with one of the mines. And we ran topside, and the ship that was close to us was gone.
One of the tactics that the Germans like to do was fly parallel to the beach at night and drop mines. So when the LSTs backed off, you'd back into them.
But a lot of the mines were there, and we had a lot of minesweepers that went by to explode all these things. But apparently this one, because once the motors of the fans of the ship drew the mines up to it, and that's what happened.
Sure, especially when you're in hard reverse, you're pulling everything toward you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So on D-Day, when you're on the beach, y'all actually, the first beach you went to was Omaha Beach.
Yeah.
What did you see when you went topside? Because the fighting had to have just started to kind of calm down on the beach itself.
Well, but it was pretty well secured. And our biggest problem is the mines and the wounded, bringing the wounded, and then the troops were gone in further than that. We were very fortunate because the battle wagons really pounded the beach, and the bombers did a lot of damage. So the beach got secured pretty well. We were very fortunate.
Did the massive scope of the invasion surprise you, or did you know that the Allies had that much equipment, that many men?
Well, I remember when we sailed over, that's all you saw was a bunch of ships, the battle wagons and that, and all the destroyers, and lots of LSTs. It's a lot of LSTs and destroyers. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you recall the most about that one particular day? About D-Day?
D-Day? Well, the one I was grateful for was when that German fighter plane was going to come down and strafe us. And then I was really worried because we were all up top tied. And the next thing I saw was that P-47 on his tail. And that was it.
Now, how did D-Day itself end for you?
Well, I don't know, because we had to stay there. We made 52 trips to cross each beach, unload, bring prisoners, bring wounded. That was our call. And then we had to worry about submarines and PT boats coming after us. And we had very little escort when we sailed from Southampton to there.
After loading up with all those wounded, delivering them back to England, and then coming back over to Normandy and loading up with German prisoners, how did you feel about those Germans that you were bringing aboard after seeing what they had done to your fellow servicemen?
Well, most of them were put down in the tank deck, and we had a bunch of our guys on the ship with guns down there. We never got down to really get to talk to them or anything like that. Very few. I think once we had a guy, one of them that was a officer, and he was wounded. He had a bag. He got shot in the back. And all the young ones, they were glad that the war was over. They were glad the war was over.
For them, at least.
Huh?
For them, at least.
Yeah.
So what was the process for landing the LST on the beach and unloading its cargo?
Well, I remember when we first came over to our ship, the whole tank deck was full with ammunition. If it had got hit with a torpedo, nobody would have survived that. But that's what we took: troops over there, ammunition, whatever's needed, and whatever we could take back to England, wounded, prisoners, and that. Because I remember the ambulance just lining up on the beach, because a lot of our LSTs were all together on the beach.
How would you unload all of the equipment that y'all carried when y'all got it to the beach? How did you get it off of the ship?
Oh, because most of it was motorized stuff.
And y'all would just pull up onto shore?
Yeah, you just land on the beach. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember when the war wasn't going too good, and I can't think of the town. We almost lost it. But I remember we loaded up about 200 or 300 young military soldiers, and we had to take them to France to go into Germany to fight, because the Battle of the Bulge, we were losing the Battle of the Bulge because the sky was clouded. You couldn't see, you couldn't get the planes over, and we were almost losing. So we had to get new troops in there, and we had these troops. They were all my age, 19 years old, 18 years old. I remember we took them from England to France and unloaded on the beach to go to the Battle of the Bulge.
So I was still traveling, bringing replacements over.
Oh yeah, that's all we did. Yeah, and I remember when we sailed back. I remember when the buzz bombs were flying over to England, into London. Yeah.
So looking back now, 76 years after the fact, how do you feel about the experiences you had during Exercise Tiger and during D-Day?
Yeah, made me feel life was really important. And how grateful I was that the Lord looked over us. Our ship never got a scratch. It brought all our fellows back home. And of course, most of my buddies are all gone now.
You're one of the last?
Well, I'm sure there's a few of them left. I hope there's more of them left. Yeah. We used to have reunions. Yeah. We used to meet every once in a while. In fact, we made a trip back to Europe, went to D-Day and over there, saw all the things, went to the cemetery.
What was that like for you to go back? Was that your first trip back, first of all?
Yeah.
And if so, what was it like?
I went back with my wife and a bunch of the fellows that I was on the ship with. And we went back there. We spent about a couple of weeks there in England, and we went to France, went to the cemetery, went to the beaches. You know, just reminisced the beaches of where we landed. And especially, I'll tell you what really got is when you go into the cemetery and you see all those crosses, and then you see one cross with all their names on it. And then you see one cross that says, "No name, but the Lord knows." It makes you cry. And to thank the Lord that we were survived.
Those were the unknowns.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, Mr. George, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me this morning. I see we have a lot of questions coming through the chat. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask you some questions that we have coming in. So Andrew is asking, do any LSTs from D-Day still survive today? And I will ask an LST sailor that, because you would probably know better than me.
Well, I heard one time there was some LSTs, but they were bought for very cheap. Yeah, and I don't know if there are many still, but there is one or two, I think, left that I hear of.
There's one in Indiana.
There was one in Indiana.
All right, and let's see. Bradley is asking, does anybody know why there were no reported German S-boats attacking the invasion flotilla? I'm guessing that he is referring to Exercise Tiger, why the S-boats weren't reported. And do you have an answer for that, Mr. George?
No, I really don't. No, I don't know.
Okay. I know some of the ships actually did pick them up.
But they knew they were there. We didn't know they were that close.
The British had different radio frequencies.
Yeah.
Which is why the American vessels did not know. So let's see, we got another. Scott on Facebook is asking, do you recall seeing the tow planes and gliders going over when you were heading to the beach?
No, I didn't see the gliders because the gliders went late at night. They went very early. And we picked up a bunch of the gliders and we picked up a lot of the paratroopers. The paratroopers went maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the morning.
All right, let's see. Mike asks, this late in the war, were German planes and submarines still much of a menace? Yes, they were.
Yeah, they were a menace. But on the beach, we had control.
Okay, let's see. Will asks, were any of the S-boats hit or sunk during Exercise Tiger? Do you know if y'all hit any of those boats y'all were fighting?
No, I don't remember. I don't think so.
Of course, y'all were going 7 miles an hour and they were going 50 miles an hour, so it's a little difficult to fire at them, huh?
Yeah.
So let's see. Let's take one more question here, Mr. George. Let's see. That one's actually. I'll end with that one. So Joyce would like to know, how did the war end for you and when?
Well, I remember a lot of the ships were going back home and I didn't have enough points to get out. So the story was that we were supposed to get our ship to get fitted to go to the Pacific for the war with Japan. And the next thing I know, the war ended, and then a bunch of the ships were going home, and my ship was still there. And finally, we had orders, and then we left and went back to. We landed in Norfolk. And then from there, I got the engineering officer asked me if I'd stay on with him and for a couple of months, and I said, well, I want to go home, but I didn't have enough points. So we went down to Cuba, down to the naval base down there, and I was down there for about 2 or 3 months, and then I had enough points. And then I had enough points, and I got off the ship and I got on a train and I went to Great Lakes, Illinois, and that's where I was escorted out. And I remember my sleeping bag and my bag, and I got on a train and I went into Chicago and I walked home and saw my mom. My dad was gone. I lost my dad when I was overseas. And that's the last time I was with the Navy. And I had a great experience, and I had a bunch of great guys. And the worst part that I regret, even to this day, that all those guys we lost that we couldn't save. That brings tears to my eyes.
Well, Mr. George, let's end this one on a little bit more of a high note. So George asks, what's the secret to having a full head of hair at 95? He says he's 30 years younger and is jealous.
Just wash it all the time.
Kerosene.
Well, Mr. George, again, thank you so very much for taking the time to share some of your experiences with us. We really do appreciate it. And we are going to go ahead and end the program right here. Thank you all so very much for joining us, and y'all have a nice weekend.
Joe, thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.